Hello and welcome. Today I'm going to show you how I made this really pretty happy birthday card using the Simply Beautiful stamp set and dies from Stampin' Up. So like I said, I used the Simply Beautiful stamp set. The only stamp I actually used is this big flower for the background. And then I used a bunch of the dies, and I'll show you that once we get to that point. I also pulled in the sentiment from the branching out stamp set. I really like this happiest birthday wishes, and it fit well on my little die cut banner. But you can pick any sentiment that you want that would fit on your card. And then the last thing I pulled in that's not in this collection is the second to smallest banner die out of the Nested Essentials dies from Stampin' Up. So to get started, I did protect my work surface. I'm going to be doing a lot of ink blending for this card, and I'm starting with an A2 size card, a horizontal or landscape card. So it's 5.5 wide by 8.5. I scored it at 4.25, and I'm leaving it open right now so that I can see where that score line is. You can kind of see that little fold there. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to stamp my background directly onto the card base. Now you can do this if you want to just use a single panel and do all of your stamping and then adhere that to your card base. You can do that as well. But I wanted to show you how you can stamp directly on the card base just to reduce one layer of cards. Sometimes our cards get really thick and bulky, maybe a little heavy. And with this card, I did a lot of layering, lots of dimensionals. So I thought, well, you know, maybe I can save one additional layer by stamping right on the card base. So I like to use some kind of a low tack tape, some kind of a masking tape. You can use a painter's tape that has a really low tack, washi tape. You can stick post-it notes on here. This is mint tape from scrapbook.com. I really like this tape because it doesn't pull up my, doesn't rip my card when I go to take it off. If you have a tape that is a little extra sticky that you feel like is going to rip your paper, you can always pull your tape off and kind of stick it to your shirt sleeve or your pants or something to take a little bit of that stick off of it to make it less sticky. I'm going to take my masking tape and put it right along the score line so it's on the back side of the card, the back flap. So I can see the score line right here, and then this is my front panel. Actually, I'm going to get this just a little lined up a little bit better here. There we go. And then I left it overhanging just a bit so that it would help hold it to my surface so that it doesn't be, doesn't slide around while I'm working. Then the next step is I am going to take that big flower out of the Simply Beautiful stamp set, and I'm using Petal Pink, the very lightest pink, and I'm going to ink up my flower. And then I'm just going to stamp this 4 times on the background. I'll ink it up in between each one. And I want it to kind of go off the edges. That's why I masked the top so that I'm not inking onto the back panel of the card. And I protected my work surface because I'm going to be, having my stamp overhang. It just looks a little bit more like background paper or something like that if you, go over the edges. So I'm going to stamp the first one here. And I'm just kind of do the 4 corners. I really don't want to overlap the images if I can help it. And I am turning this image just a little bit each time. So I'm kind of looking to see, where are my petals going to hit? Are they, too far off? Are they going to run into the last stamped image? Just to add interest, I'm turning it. And I think it just looks a little cleaner to have them not overlapping each other too much. And I am going to end up with a little blank space in the middle, but that's okay because of how I designed the card. That flower and the sentiment banners are going to kind of be covering that up anyway. So let's see here. Now I am going to overlap a little bit here, but that's okay. There we go. Okay, now I'm going to leave my masking tape on because I am going to do a little bit of ink blending, and actually I need to leave my Petal Pink out. So I'm going to take a blending brush. Any kind of blending brush or sponge will work for this, whatever your favorite kind of blending tool is. And I'm going to grab a little bit of that Petal Pink ink. I like to brush it off just a bit. Now the Petal Pink is very light, so you're really not going to need to do too much of that, but I'm going to do Calypso Coral next, and you'll see how that, does make more of a difference. And then I'm going to just go around all 4 edges and do just a little bit of a light blend. And with Petal Pink being so light, it's really kind of hard to see, but you can start to see a little bit of that color kind of show up. Give it a little bit of tint. Okay, now I saved this top part for last just so that I could talk about it a little bit more. Just be very careful when you're doing this. It's going to be the same method, just, you know, nice soft swirls, but make sure you're staying on that masking tape when you're going off the front panel. Try not to get, you know, overzealous and get the ink on the back panel. But honestly, it's a handmade card. If you get ink back there, it's not the end of the world. But if your goal is to try to keep the ink off of it, you know, just stay on that masking tape. Okay, now I'm going to stop there. I have just a really nice kind of, you know, halo around that edge of that Petal Pink. And then I'm going to grab my Calypso Coral. Now, I love Calypso Coral, but it is very vibrant. So you have to be careful when you're using this, and you really have to kind of brush off a little bit. And I shouldn't say a little bit, you really have to brush off your brush before you take it to your cardstock. Otherwise, you'll end up with kind of big blotches. So let me just show you that. You know, if you're not careful and kind of go straight to your cardstock, you can end up with a big blotch like this, or even little streaks that kind of look like that. So I really brush off first, and then just very carefully start to come into the edges. And this will add just a little bit deeper, kind of a pinky, or an orangish pink. That's what both of these shades are, kind of more orangey pink colors. All right, and I'm going to stop there. Keep the ink away for now. I will need those again. And then I'm going to peel this tape off and reveal that nice clean line here. There we go. And I'll save that masking tape. I can still use that some more on other projects, but just kind of get that nice color around the edge, and then this middle will be filled in with our focal image. So I'm going to put this off to the side. We don't need that anymore for right now. I did all of my die cutting ahead of time just to save us some time, but I will just run through this really quick to show you what I did. I also am going to have this as my blog post this week, so if you would go over there, I decided for this week, because there's so much detail, I took pictures of each step, and I have pictures where I'm showing which die and like this die cut, and the next die and you need 2 of that one, and the next die and you need 1. So it's a lot more detailed. I'm not going to go through all that here in this video, so I would like to refer you over to my blog. I will link it down below and take a look there. There's a lot more instruction on that post as well, but I am just going to run through this here quick with you. I used the two-tone cardstock Petal Pink, and I cut out the big flower die and one of the banners from the Nested Essentials dies. This is again the second from the smallest. I used the darker side. It's a little hard to tell probably on video, but I used the darker side of that two-tone cardstock. I also used the Old Olive two-tone cardstock, the darker side, and I cut out both of the big shapes of leaves. So these would cut out the stamped images from the stamp set. I'm using them as the backer. You can also use them as that for the leaf detail. And of course, I'm showing this on a piece of Old Olive, so those really don't show up very well, but you'll need both of those. You need all 3 of the leaf detail dies. The biggest of the stamen or the middle of the flower detail. There's, I think, 3 of them in the die set. You need the biggest one. And then out of the flower petals, you'll see that there's one really big one. You need 1 of those. And then that next size down, I cut 2 so that we can layer these all together and make a little bit more full flower. You'll also see in the die set there are smaller ones to make smaller flowers, but you'll be able to tell the difference between all the different sizes. We're definitely just sticking to the biggest sizes for this. So anything that's white, I decided to just cut out in white cardstock so that I could do my ink blending. That way you can really control the color and the depth of color that you're getting. You can definitely cut all this out in cardstock and stick it together. You don't have to do any inking at all. That makes it a little quicker. It is just as pretty that way. But I wanted to do this technique with some ink blending on white and just see how that turned out. So let's get started with our ink blending and start to assemble this card. The first thing I decided to do was to ink blend the edges of this big background flower in Calypso Coral. So again, same thing as we did for that background. I'm brushing off some of that and just barely coming onto the edges just to give it a little depth. You know, anytime you can add a little ink to the edges of a die cut, or, you know, any like piece of paper. I think about scrapbooking. A lot of people are doing the, you know, inking edges and stuff. It just adds some depth. So if that's something that you like, you know, if it's a detail you like to add, you don't have to, of course, but, you know, give it a try and see if you like it. See if you like the outcome, the effect. Just a little something different you can do. It's kind of fun when you've been paper scrapping or, you know, paper crafting, scrapbooking, stamping for a long time. It's fun to try different things once in a while, and kind of fun to add some new techniques to your tool belt and be able to do some different things. So I didn't do anything with the green. You know, you can certainly ink the edges of this as well with that old olive. It would add some more depth to that. But what I will do is grab the three little middle pieces, the detail parts of the leaves. Now you'll notice that I left some of the little white detail, or the little punch out piece. That's going to come out. It die cuts it out, but if it didn't fall out, I just left it because that'll give it a little bit more stability as I'm inking. Some of them did fall out, and that's okay too. You can do it either way. But if, you know, if they can stay in, like these flower petals, you know, if they can stay in until you're done inking and then you can pull them out, it adds some stability, because we're going to be brushing and stuff over the top. So now I am taking the old olive and another little blending brush, ink that up a little bit, make sure I don't have too much. Let me zoom in just a tad here. And I'm okay leaving white out toward the tip. I think anytime you can leave a little bit of white on your die cuts when you're inking, it kind of gives that highlight. You know, if you look at anything in nature, you're going to see a variety of shades, all the way from really dark to, you know, a pretty light highlight. And leaving some white, I think, is okay because it kind of makes it look like, you know, that highlight that you might see. Now, if you feel like it looks awkward, fill it in. One other thing I'll show you what you can do. You know, once you get, if you feel like, okay, now where my finger was, I think that looks kind of funny. If you feel that way, I think it looks okay, but you can always just kind of grab the opposite end carefully and just gently brush over it. And that'll just give it a little bit more color. It'll give it color. It's not all white. You might like that look a little bit better. So just kind of play with it and try different things. Now this one I didn't wipe my brush off enough. I am getting it a little bit streaky, but I'm okay with that because these leaves are kind of hidden a little bit underneath that flower. And even if it turns out a little streaky, it's just fine. Oh. Okay. There we go. Now I am going to go ahead and pull these middles out. One way you can do it, they can pop out pretty easy. You can use something pointy, you know, like a little tweezer or something like that. These pop out pretty easy. I'll show you when we get to the flowers a little trick so that you don't tear anything. If you can get a hold of just a little end, maybe I'll have to do my little trick on this one. You kind of take the end and wiggle back and forth a little. It kind of helps loosen some of the little places it's holding on. Otherwise, if you just go yank it, it sometimes will rip the actual piece that you don't want to tear. Okay, Now I think the next step I'll do is glue these detail pieces onto the background of the leaves, and then that'll give them a little bit of time to dry while we ink the other pieces of our flowers. Okay, so I like to use just a little liquid glue with a fine nozzle. That helps me kind of control where the glue is going. And when I'm gluing some smaller die cut pieces, I usually will try to grab them with a tweezer. That just helps me hang on to them a little bit easier also. So I'm just going to put a few dots on here. Doesn't need too much glue. All right. And I'm going to put this one right here. I'm looking at my sample card to see which leaves I put these different details onto. And I think I looked in the catalog to see which ones they used for each leaf. But honestly, I'm not sure that it really makes a difference. They might fit a little bit differently, but it's kind of really up to your interpretation. Like which detail piece do you like on which background? So you can kind of have fun mixing and matching. Do that one there. Okay. All right, and then I'm just going to kind of scoot those to the side, and we will work on inking up the flowers and the stamen. Actually, let's do the stamen first just because that's a small piece. That will not take long. Let me zoom in a little bit more since it's so tiny. Now, I am just going to use some Daffodil Delight. It's hard to see on here. Daffodil Delight on this, and a small blending brush. Again, you can use any blending brush. You can use a big one if you want. But since I have small ones, I'm going to go ahead and use that. I'm just getting a little bit of ink on my brush. I'm again going to hold out toward the tips because that's where I want my highlights to be. And I'm going to do more of the inking toward the base. And then kind of, the most intense color will be down at the base. And then I'll just kind of work my way up a little bit. Flip that around so I can hold the other ones while I'm probably working my way right off the screen because I'm so zoomed in. Sorry about that. Okay. Then you can see how it's darker down there and lighter up there. I'm going to leave that like that so it has those highlights kind of built right in. All right, and then we'll move on to the flowers themselves. So I've pulled a couple different colors for this. I'm really basing this card on Petal Pink and Calypso Coral. I'm going to zoom back out because these pieces are a little bigger. We need a little more room to work here. So Petal Pink and Calypso Coral. I have found that if you pull in some Cajun Craze, that does look nice with the Calypso Coral and gives that a little more depth, some deeper color. So keep that in mind that you can kind of go, it might seem kind of weird to put Cajun Craze with these colors, but it really does look nice. It kind of gives that deeper shadowy color. So what I am going to do first here is show you, like I said earlier, there are 3, get these lined up so you can kind of see. There are 3 layers. This is the biggest one, and then these 2 are the same size. Now you can decide, do you want your darkest color to be at the bottom, closest to the card base, or do you want your darkest color to be at the top, closer to the surface with that stamen right on top of it? I think a lot of times when a flower blooms, the deepest color is on the inside, and as it opens up, those more outside leaves kind of end up being lighter, and that deepest color is right in the middle. Well, I'm doing it a little bit opposite on my sample, and that's basically because I did the colored base. I decided to use the colored cardstock for this. So I am deciding to do my darkest color at the bottom and then making it lighter as it goes forward. So I'm going to start then with my biggest color, or my biggest flower, and I'm going to skip the Petal Pink. Oops. I'm going to skip the petal pink and go straight to Calypso Coral. Now keep in mind, these are going to be layered on top of each other, so you're not going to see really the middle, but when I'm inking it, I'm always going to start in the middle and make sure that it's well inked, that that's where my deepest color is at. So I have my Calypso Coral and I have my little brush. I'm going to grab some color. And again, I want to do a nice job of it, so I am going to just kind of brush off a little bit and make sure I don't end up with a big blob. And I should also point out, this is where I kept in some of those inside pieces that will get popped out. If they stayed in, I left them in. This one popped out when I die cut it, and that's okay. But some of these little fine little projections or whatever, they can get caught a little bit easier when you're doing the ink blending. So by keeping them in, it might just kind of help protect those a little bit. But keep in mind, you don't have to be a heavy-handed ink blender. If you are a little bit more gentle with it, you won't necessarily get caught and pull those different pieces as you're blending. So just a little tip. So I'm going to kind of hang on to, maybe a couple of the flower petals if I can. Start right in the middle, just real gently, and work my way out. And I'll hold that up a little bit. So right away you can see that really pretty color that starts to form. And I'm going to keep going. I want this one to be the deepest color, like I said. So I'm going to ink up some more, brush a little bit off. Hang on so I don't lose it. And keep inking. And I do want to go a little further out, out toward the petal ends. Just because this one is going to be at the very bottom. So I'll focus a little bit more on these upper layers to have more of that highlight out toward the end. There we go. I think I'm going to stop there. Actually, I'll do a little bit deeper in the middle here if I can. Now, I am skipping doing the Cajun Craze on this one because this is going to be covered up anyway. If my darkest color was at the very top, if I decided to reverse this, I would be adding some Cajun Craze to the center of that just to really help deepen that shadow in the middle. This one I'm not going to, just because it will be all covered up by these other layers. Okay, now the next layer I'm going to also start with, no, actually I think I'll start with Petal Pink, but we'll be adding that Calypso Coral. So let me grab my Petal Pink brush, brush off a little, and just kind of do that same thing. And this one again is so light that you really have to build that color up. Just take your time building it up. And I am going a little heavier with this because that top layer still is going to be on, and it's going to have the Petal Pink as well. So I need, I need some room for that one to be light, so this one has to be a little bit darker. Okay, I think I'm going to stop there with my Petal Pink, and then I'm going to grab my Calypso Coral, brush off a little bit, and we'll add some of this Calypso Coral to the center and out just a bit. And I'll stop there for now. We'll see if I need to add any more. And I just want to show kind of the difference between those two. You can see this bottom layer is going to be quite a bit darker than the middle layer. Okay, and then for this top one, I'm going to for sure start with Petal Pink. Let's see, I think I'll grab it on opposite petals here, opposite sides. And I really want to leave the white out toward the tips just to have a nice highlight. And I think I'll stop there. The one other thing that I did do with this top layer in my sample is I added a little bit of that Daffodil Delight. So I'm going to come in with I'll use that little brush again just because it has the ink on it. And add a little bit of yellow right in the middle. just to kind of give that hue. All right, and I think we'll stop there. Let me grab all these again. And there you can kind of see the difference between each level of our flower. So now I think we can go ahead and start assembling. And before we assemble, let's actually go ahead and stamp our sentiment. Again, this one is from the branching out stamp set. I just really liked the size of it to fit on this banner. This is retired currently, so I would say, you know, if you have a different sentiment you want to use, make sure that you just pick a die, or even just cut a, you know, cut a piece of cardstock that will fit your sentiment. You know, if it's bigger than what this particular little banner die is, just make sure you fit the two together. And I am using my favorite black ink, the VersaFine Onyx Black. It just does a really nice job stamping sentiments. Nice and crisp. Okay, now we can go ahead and assemble. All right, now for a card like this, you can certainly just take your base and adhere everything straight down onto it. I thought I would add a lot of depth and you know, dimension with this. So I used a lot of dimensionals, and that's totally up to you if you want to do the same. So, you know, thinking about that, if you're going to be mailing this, you might want to use a bubble, you know, like a padded bubble mailer, something like that, so that it doesn't wreck your card and all your layers that you've worked so hard on. You know, either way, it would probably need additional postage because it is thicker. So, you know, you might as well protect your creation by putting it in a bubble mailer as well. So now this base, I'm not trying to line anything up in particular. So I just, you know, kind of decided how do I want this on here? It really doesn't matter, but to me this looks a little bit more like a bottom, and then it's kind of more curved up here. So I'm going to put it this way, and I'm kind of putting it down toward the bottom left. That way I'll have some room for my sentiment over here and some of those leaves to come out over here on this side. So I did put some dimensionals behind that. Now for these leaves, I'm just kind of curling them a little bit with my fingers just to give them some depth. I am going to glue the stem part of it. So a little glue kind of toward the middle. And then I'm also going to add just a little dimensional kind of on the outside of each leaf, just to help hold it up off the card. If I can get the backing off. There we go. Okay. And then this one I'm just going to tuck because I only did the 3 dimensionals. I have room to tuck. We'll put... I did the 3 dimensionals behind here, so I have room to tuck that back behind, and I'm kind of pressing to make sure it stays down. All right, and then this third leaf that's single, I'm again gonna give it a little bit of a curl, do some glue toward the middle. This one I'm not gonna put a dimensional under yet. I'll wait and see if that's something I wanna do a little bit later. That one I'm gonna put right there. And since we're working on the very back part, why don't I go ahead and do these banners. I'm going to put a little bit of glue toward that flat side and kind of just tuck it right here. I think I will come back actually and add a little dimensional, just a mini one, right under this front corner. Keep that up off the edge. The banner that has our sentiment, I'm for sure going to add a little dimensional under the 2 little flag pieces. And again, glue. Okay. All right, now to start assembling the rest of the flower, here's where my little trick kind of comes in. These pieces, they might be kind of stuck on here and I don't want to rip my flower, so I'll grab a part that's free and just kind of start wiggling it back and forth. That seems to kind of free any part that's stuck without tearing, or at least so far it's worked for me. So just kind of a little wiggle and it just comes right out. usually. For some reason, this one is quite a bit more stuck. It isn't cut as well on the back, so I am going to grab some scissors. These are the closest scissors I have, and I'm going to kind of just go in from behind here and see where the edge of that die cut is and do just a little bit of a cut. See if I can free any more of that. Let's see. It isn't hanging on by too much, but it's just enough that I'm afraid I'll rip the actual flower if I just go tearing at it. So I'm gonna try to be as careful as I can here. There we go. I think I got it. There, that's not too bad. Okay. All right, and then what I'm going to do is just put a dimensional on the back middle of this, and that's all the adhesion I'm doing, or adhesive I'm doing on this back one. And you can see it does show, but that's going to be covered by the other layers on top, so I'm not concerned about that. Let's see, how do I want this? Oh, I think I'll do it this way. Oh, actually, nope, I'm gonna... It's covering up part of my sentiment. Turn it just a tad there so it's not covering the bee. There we go. Okay, and then the next layer. All right, and again, I'm going to do a big dimensional right on the back. It has a nice area, but you know, some of it shows a little. Again, doesn't bother me. If it bothers you, go ahead and use a different size. Let's see, I think I'll go... Should we do this on this one? Let's go like this, actually. Okay, we're getting there, just about. All right, now this layer I am going to just do a little dimensional. Oh, and let's go about there. Okay, now this steam and area, I did put dimensionals behind this as well, but there isn't as much surface area. So what I did was I took a mini dimensional and I cut it in half. You could just glue it straight down too. I mean, really, at this point, there's a lot of dimension already. So if you want to eliminate one layer, I think this would certainly be it. So I just put those two little halves of that mini dimensional on there, and we'll just pop that right up here. All right, and that is our really pretty Calypso Coral and Petal Pink flower card made using the Simply Beautiful stamp set and dies from Stampin' Up. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed the video. Have a great rest of your day.